All right, welcome everybody to today's conversation. I'm so pleased to introduce you to two really experienced principals, and we have a great guest host with us to have a conversation about what it's been like to lead schools this year and what our principals hope for next for both their students and for their teachers and their campuses going forward. So first, let me introduce Andy Rotherman, who is a co-founder and partner of Bellweather Education. Andy writes widely, speaks all over the place about education issues. He has co-founded, advised a number of education organizations over his career, and Bellweather works with many education organizations to help them innovate to improve student outcomes. So Andy, thank you so much for being here. I'd also like to introduce you to our two great principals. First, Tamara Albury, who is the principal of the Young Women's Leadership Academy in Fort Worth ISD here in Texas. So Tamara's been a teacher, a curriculum writer, a coach of other educators before becoming a principal. And she also is widely traveled, which she hasn't been able to do much of in the last year and a half. So if you run into her in an airport somewhere, you can ask her all about her adventures. So welcome, Tamara. I'd also like to introduce Carrie Flores. Carrie has been in Fort Worth for over 20 years. She is the principal at Western Hills High School. Is this your 12th year as a principal, Carrie? 11th year? 12th year.
Yep.
So you've been around the bend a few times with leading a campus. I know you have a lot of experience and insight about that. So why don't we actually start, Carrie, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your campus, and then Tamara will have you do the same.
So Western Hills High School, it's on the west side of Fort Worth. We have about 900 students, about 880. We are in an area that is very, very transient. We probably have about a 30% mobility rate, about 89% economically disadvantaged, 45% Hispanic, about 40% or 35%, I would say, African-American, 20% white. Like I said, very transient. We do service an area of town that is really known for, high crime, a lot of movement, a lot of mobility. But, all that, and I can still say that, we've got really, really good kids, and I've got like a dedicated team of teachers that when you look at, like, say, our state assessment and state scores, and you compare them across the district, we're, one of the top performing, just a traditional high school. So, our kids come to learn, our teachers are here to work, and it's a great place to be.
Tamara, tell us about the Young Women's Leadership Academy.
So we are a school of choice within Fort Worth ISD. We service over 40 different zip codes, over 40 different elementary schools within the district. Our enrollment of next year is slated to be 524, and it's college prep. And so our demographics were 90% students of color, 76% of our students live at or below the poverty level, with about 40% of our students being labeled at risk for not graduating high school. And we are graduating our sixth graduating class this year, and every year we've had 100% graduation rate. 100% of our students are accepted into four-year institutions, and U.S. News and World Report was just released, and so we're number 1 in Fort Worth, we're number 17 in the state of Texas, and 117 in the country. So we are very proud of the work that is done on our campus. We are, it's about college prep, it's about college access, and not just going to college, but graduating and becoming those leaders of tomorrow. So that's our goal. And we're 100% women, female, so we're amazing just as is.
Well, I'll kick us off. We're going to have kind of a broad-ranging conversation, but here's the first broad question for you. So you both of your campuses have been in person for much of the year, but I also know you've grappled a little bit with hybrid or virtual instruction along the way. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the biggest challenges you've had in operating a campus this year. What does it really look like day to day?
I would say one of the first things, socially and emotionally, it's been really challenging. I think the career of education is very much about connections and relationships. We always talk about teachers building relationships with students. And with this the virtual platform, it's very hard for teachers to build those lasting relationships. You have counselors that can't touch children, give a hug, or if they're, they're in a social emotional state. And so basically it seems like everyone's been operating in a state of trauma, leading in trauma, learning in trauma, teaching in trauma. And so having to change our focus in terms of a traditional way and trying to stop forcing the traditional normal way of doing things into this new way of doing things, right? So and thinking about the workday, thinking about students when we assign them assignments, not necessarily doing it on a weekend because they need a break. They need a break from the Zoom, just like we all do. And then instruction, because we instead of with this new platform, you have veteran teachers that are now first year teachers again. And people, when it comes to being effective, I've been effective my whole entire career as a teacher, and now I don't know how to grapple with this. And so that whole idea of value of teachers, value of leaders, because everything is so different and you have to be innovative. And so it really does test your ability to be innovative because there are so many different things you can't control. Being innovative is like the only thing that you can control.
And just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Tamara said, I think relationships and connections, a big thing in a traditional high school, it is all the traditions that you have, right? And the things that kids are involved in. This year, our number of students involved in choir or involved in band, involved in any kind of a sport is so low that it's really hard to get any kind of, excitement around that. I would say at the beginning of the school year, when we opened up, we're operating with probably less than 50% of our kids that chose to come back into person. So you have a lunch and and you'd never think a high school principal would say this, right? But it's too quiet. The hallways are too quiet. It's like the kids walk around almost like zombies. Like I do think that relationship and that connection is missing. One of the things that we really, really have struggled with here is that engagement, getting students engaged in I would say the majority of the kids are doing the work, engaging with their teachers in some form, right? Maybe they're not logging onto the Zoom, but they are emailing the teacher, they're doing the work that's posted. But we have a lot of kids that are choosing to stay home or choosing to stay virtual because they're working, right? They are now a supplemental income and helping their families. And I think that some of the employers are kind of taking advantage of the situation. And we're calling kids and saying, this isn't working. We need you to come back in person. And they're like, well, I got to check with my job. And I'm like, well, no, school is your job, right? But they need that income. And I do think some employers are, they're getting to reap the benefits of kids being able to work. We've got kids now that are watching younger siblings because mom and dad are working. And now it's free daycare. Parents don't have to pay for taking their child someplace. And so older brother or older sister can take care of the little ones, or mom and dad can work. And, it's, again, to us, it's an engagement. We're having a hard time getting a small percentage of our kids to really engage and do what we need them to do. And, we worry about, graduation, we worry about passing, we worry about retention rates. I think that's been a struggle.
So you were in school, as Anne said, you guys, were in school for much of the year. Texas has been different than a lot of states in that way, but you also were delivering some instruction virtually at different points during this and so forth. Talk about that and sort of how that's worked, what didn't work, what are any big sort of learnings and so forth that you have from the experience with experience that was forced on you with virtual.
Well, I think that we've had different types of virtual, right? Like when we started this at the beginning, end of last year in March, right, with the beginning of the pandemic, it was what are we going to do? We had an online platform that all students were enrolled in this one online platform. Teachers were, helping to make sure lessons were uploaded. So we went that way for a while. And then we started this school year off. We had a little bit of mixture, right? Where some kids came in person, some stayed virtual. And now we have a third option to where kids can be either all in person. So, we have three options. They're either all in person, they're hybrid, or they are all virtual. I think the hard part with virtual is that, we're seeing that students still need guidance, right? I mean, we're still talking about adolescents. We're talking about 14, 15, 16-year-olds that I think sometimes some people think, well, they're in high school, right? Like they should be able to log on and do their work because they're responsible students. You're in high school now. And I think even with the virtual, there still takes a lot of guidance from a teacher and a lot of check-in with a teacher. And, one of the unusual, I think a positive that has come out of this is that in the past, for me, I can only speak from, like my experience, right? at the high school level, teachers are reluctant to call home and to make those parent contacts. And but through this, they've had to. We've had to like exhaust every kind of resource we can to call, do home visits, emails and texting, Google Voice, try that, you know. So it's teachers, I think, are a lot more comfortable now of having to call home. So I definitely think virtual works for some kids, but for others, it has to be guided. It cannot just be thrown out there and let them try.
So I agree with everything that Carrie said. I think we have had a few students who really thrive in that environment. And so I know a lot of times when we talk about differentiation, right, I think that virtual can be a differentiated way of delivering instruction for certain students. Some students do well, right? When you think about college, some people do well with the online courses, and some people need brick and mortar. And so what it has done is it's allowed those students that really online is for them. They've been able to thrive and really do well in that environment. And also for families, I think it has, I'm going to say a virtual instruction has been a great Band-Aid for some families who have lost income because of the pandemic and a variety of things. And so a lot of our kids are now having to work, you know what I mean? Work to pay not just the cell phone bill, but rent, you know, and their basic needs, cover their basic needs. And so having that flexibility allows for students to still obtain an education, but meet their needs at home. And so I think that there is a place for virtual learning. It should not be a blanket one size fits all. And there definitely needs to be a way to identify those students who really thrive in that environment and those students who thrive more so in person. But I think one of the dangers, right, is that I think I go back to thinking about like text messages, right? And students, when they send text messages and understanding tone, understanding all those things that you need human contact to do. So the virtual instruction has resulted in students not having that human contact, right? And we are, I mean, as creatures, we need that connection. We need to be able to have those social interactions to be able to really exist in society. And so that's one thing I would say that has been that is definitely necessary. So if virtual instruction is something to do in the future, like an option for a district, there needs to be a social component incorporated within that for students really to be that leader or to be successful in life. Theoretically, you cannot sit in front of a computer all day and be isolated, right? At some point, you have to deal with people. And so you have to understand how to deal with people. I think one of the other things too, as it relates to teachers, you know, you have a lot of teachers who are very reluctant when it comes to professional development and technology. But what this has taught us is that everyone is capable if they have to do it, right? And so all of those people who want to push back and things like that, they did it, they embraced it, and they are thriving in that environment with technology and virtual instruction and how to pivot and all those different things. And so I think that one, it allowed people to see what they're made of and their capabilities to that next level. And so it really did help teachers to build their capacity as instructors and their tools with their variety of platforms, right? And so it helped to have teachers who would normally, you know, we say sit and get, right? Where they're, you know, stand and deliver. Now I have to be more interactive. Now I have to be innovative. Now I have to figure out how to engage students. Where before I could rely on standing in front of the classroom and lecturing, I cannot do that anymore. Not if I really want to engage my students and ensure they're achieving at certain levels. And so it has forced people to move in their craft and build their capacity as educators.
Oh, you made an interesting point there, which I think like you have to hold two ideas in your head at the same time, right? For some subset of kids, this has actually been good. They've enjoyed the virtual has opened up some different things for them and so forth. For most kids, this has been less than ideal. And so later on in this conversation, we'll talk about sort of, you know, learning loss, unfinished learning and all that. But for right now, like, do you have any plans to sort of, I mean, I know, right, like everyone's hair is on fire, you know, coming out of the pandemic, but are you starting to think about, you were saying that this does work for some kids. Are you starting to even think about what that might look like and changes going forward, innovations that you would, you know, go ahead and keep, you know, for coming school years based on this? or is it just too soon because you're still like putting out fires every day?
I think it's too soon, but one thing that I think has been really great, on my campus, we do a lot of field trips. And so students miss a lot of classes and teachers are, algebra, they need to be out of algebra, this experience, they need, kind of thing. And so what this has done though, it has created a database for teachers that if a student is missing a class, this is an opportunity for them to get the instruction, even if they're not in class, right? And so it does really offer a lot of different opportunities in terms of how we think of school and how we think of what we do. Um, in terms of, I know we were contemplating the whole virtual academy. I'm not sure where our district is on that piece, because we take our guidance from them. But I think definitely putting aspects of the virtual learning in terms of the instruction cycle would be a great idea. For example, if there's a student who has not mastered an objective, here is a video you can watch so you can kind of learn, get some questions, and get that extra tutorial, that individualized learning can come from all of these different lessons that are virtual that were not available before.
Yeah, and I was kind of, as Tamara was talking, kind of thinking about credit recovery, right? In the past, traditionally, like if a student fails algebra, we tend to put them in a trailer course, try to compact in the semester so that they're ready to take geometry, compact in the semester. And now I wonder, could we, and what would it look like to do credit recovery in a virtual setting while the student's still progressing maybe in the geometry, but the algebra, since the teachers now have the platform, they know how to use the Google Classroom, they know how to tailor a lesson, compact it within, a virtual setting. Can students try to regain credit that way while they're still moving forward? So it's not, we're not holding kids back so much, almost, if that makes sense. So I kind of wonder if that could be something that we explore or look at, or what those options would look like.
Let's talk a little bit more about instruction, because I know that's been a key thing for you all. And we know nationally there's been a lot of talk about whether there should be state summative assessments. In Texas, of course, that's the STAR test. And those give us that once a year shot of understanding students' learning. Of course, those didn't happen in last spring with all states sort of suspended those tests. They're happening in Texas, at least in sort of a adapted version, I guess I would say, for this spring. But I'm really curious for both of you how you've tried to measure learning on your campus, and what are you using to understand where your kids are, and then help your teachers design their instruction accordingly. I know you both do this in your practice. I'd be curious what that's looked like this year and if it's been different than you've done before.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been tough. I'm not gonna lie, it's been tougher this year. I think because our state and we are so heavily driven by state assessments that we rely on that data. We'll do benchmarks and things like that, but we found out, this year we tried doing benchmarks in the fall as a district, and even we tried doing the in-person kids are doing it, then the virtual kids, they could do it on their own. Well, we were seeing that, through the system that they were taking the virtual test on, they would be on the test for like 8 minutes and they scored a 100. We're like, so it was easy to tell, this is not valid data, because they can clearly look at answers and things like that. So we suspended benchmarks, so teachers didn't have that. So and again, another positive, right? I do think we've got to look at what have been some of the good things that have come out of this, is that it has forced teachers to work together more to come up with common assessments that align to what they're teaching. It's forced them to rely more heavily on formative assessment, and being, better skilled at how to embed and use a formative assessment, take that data, change what I'm doing. So those have been kind of, again, like Tamara said, some forced learning that is a positive thing. That's a good thing that we've been saying for years, but now it's okay, now you really have to do it, and it's working, and they're seeing the benefits of some of those things.
We also have the MAP data, which tests our students with ELA and math, and then their growth, as well as achievement. On our campus, because all of our students are taking AP exams, what we've begun doing is providing our students with the opportunity to take mock exams to assess really where the deficiencies are, the strengths, the opportunities, to fill those in and make sure that that they are filled as much as possible toward as we head toward the exam. It's so hard to really, because there's so much social emotional um, trauma just happening with our students, that I think we just had our panorama data, which really kind of assessed the health, the emotional health of our faculty, as well as our students, where our students are feeling isolated and they're feeling, and so what we've done a really good job on, I think, as a district, is really focusing on that social emotional, because if students are not socially and emotionally well, there is no learning taking place, no matter what you do. And students have been, they're home in whatever their home situations are for the last year and a half. And so it's just been a challenge for everyone. And while we do have assessments to kind of see where they are and what we're working with, I think definitely we have done a lot of work around making sure that our students are okay.
Both of you, what advice do you have for for parents, for your colleagues elsewhere, particularly states that aren't as far along as Texas in terms of the opening, and then for policymakers?
I don't know if it's personal, right? Or if it's just my opinion, but I think that we are seeing, I agree with Tamara, there is a place for virtual learning, right? And I do think some kids can benefit from it and some kids do really, really well on it. But I also think that we are seeing the value of face-to-face instruction, and you can't replace face-to-face instruction. We've got too many kids, as Tamara said, are dealing with like SEL trauma that need connection with adults. We have too many kids that are failing, and we as teachers need to get them here so that we can support them and help them, and help guide them to be successful. So I do think, in my opinion, I think this has really shown that getting face to face and in person with the teacher far outweighs some other of the concerns that we've had.
Definitely, I agree. I think that there needs to be a bigger push and a lot. This is my personal opinion, as it relates to social emotional and just making sure that our students are in a place to learn. They've been living in a trauma for the last year, and so kind of just to piggyback on what Carrie was saying, is that the reason why in person is so important, it's part of that idea of touch and connectedness. And they don't have that looking at a screen, even though there's someone on the other end, a real human speaking to them, being that knowing that someone cares about me, and I'm in that space, and they care about my well-being, they care about my learning, they care about me as a human, it's invaluable for our students. And I really think that as we enter post-pandemic, we need to really think about what are the effects of learning and living in trauma for a year. I don't know if that data exists anywhere, and use that as to help us with our comprehensive needs assessment of what we need to focus on as we're entering in a post-pandemic era. Because if we don't put those at the forefront and we don't address those things, and we just go head into academics achievement will never be reached, because all of those other things, if I'm dealing with, I didn't eat, I didn't sleep last night, I didn't eat breakfast this morning, I come to school, all of that, I got into a fight, whatever it might be, I come to school, all of that is heavy on my heart, heavy on my head. And then I have to sit down and write a 2-page essay. My mind is not focusing on that. And so that really needs to be at the forefront, because if they used to tell you before you take a test, make sure you have a great breakfast and you have positive thoughts and you go to sleep early, right? And so all that stuff, it plays a role, it plays a huge part. And so if that is not a part of the conversation, and it's not just about the academic standards, but the social emotional ones as well, we're not ever going to make up what this last year has taken from us in education.
Those are things that we worry about in a regular school year too, right? Like that's part of working in a high poverty urban school district. I think what we're also looking at is we're looking at a freshman class, right? That really hasn't had a freshman class. So when we're talking about next year, and as a district, which I love that we're going to freshman teaming and a freshman success team and really have this emphasis on how to support our freshmen, but we also have to be thinking our sophomores and how are we transitioning them into high school, because some of them haven't been to high school at all. So it's this transition of not just one class that we have to worry about, or not just the fifth graders. It's almost like a 2-year gap in kids that we're going to have to really, really support and work with.
Tamara, you mentioned Panorama, which for people who don't know, that's a commercial vendor that provides surveys and so forth for schools, so you can get a sense of what's going, climate surveys and so forth. Like, but take us one level down, like that or other things that you're like, how are you actually, I mean, kids are coming back, as you said, they've experienced trauma or are experiencing trauma as a result of this. As Carrie said, some of that is unfortunately stuff that happens in any average school year, but it's obviously more acute with everything that's going on. But kids have experienced lots of different things. So how do you all, like on a personalized level, how are you identifying what's going on with kids? And then what are the supports and so forth that you can put in place?
I meet all the time with my counselors and my interventionists to gauge where are my students, what's actually happening with them, but also making a concerted effort to provide them with the opportunity to express themselves and to feel safe. We call them safe spaces where they can express themselves. They can have others that are supportive around them, to give that some level of connection. We've also started something called Ractivists. So it's random acts of kindness plus activists, where they are doing kindness. They have a kindness quote in the morning, and they have things that they're doing, putting around the school specifically, to kind of encourage that whole idea of kindness, being kind to yourself, being kind to others. It's kind of like you have to retrain students how to do school. Even students who have been on campus and have gone home, and have been virtual for a couple of months, when they come back, they're very lost, right? Because the world has gone on without them. And so that's something we have to be mindful of. I think, as Carrie said, we have students that have never stepped foot on campus, whatever that looks like. And so they're lost. And transition and change is really hard for anybody, because change is about loss of something, right? And how exactly you process that level of loss. So I think that definitely grace needs to just continue. It just shouldn't just be during the pandemic, but post-pandemic, we need to have some level of grace of how people are processing change when they come back. People don't process it always the same way, but providing people wherever they are at a variety of different levels, the support to be successful in that environment.
Yeah, so this year with our attendance, so since September, our kids, when they check in to their class for an attendance measure, we kind of created a Google form and they click on a link, but we also have within that link questions for them around, just kind of, how are you feeling? Do you need a counselor to contact you? Do you need an assistant principal to contact you? So we are, every day in every period, the students are sending in, how are they doing? Sometimes I'm sure it can get, by this time, I don't know how much they're really taking it serious or not. So we've been trying to identify kids through that. I was thinking, for next year, this is our first year having an advisory period, and it's been kind of an odd year to have an advisory period, but next year I definitely want to keep it. I feel like there's a lot of value in having an advisory period. So I'm looking at purchasing with our Title I money, a SEL program that will help train our teachers also. And it's a resource right there for my teachers to use within this small group, and really give my teachers tools to build that sense of community with kids again, how to make connections and building relationships with students again. So I think, our teachers are going to need the support and the training of how to redo school with kids again and how to get the kids back connected.
And I think definitely coming at it from a point that everyone has been living in trauma. Trauma informed needs to be the buzzword, where everyone has the strategies to navigate a trauma-informed campus, a trauma-informed school. What does that mean as an educator? What are things that they need to think about when they're creating lessons, really getting to know their students and what that looks like. And so one of the things that we're also doing is we're trying to become a trauma-informed campus, because one, we know that all of our students have been living in trauma. And so we know that going forward, we need to be mindful of that and all that we do. And that's going to be our foundation for providing services to our students. But like Carrie, we also had a Google Doc where students would answer questions every day. And what that actually did was it helped our interventionists and our counselors catch issues early. based upon the questions, they could gauge where a child was and follow up with the child, follow up with the parents. And so that I think is a great thing, because we haven't been that diligent or that, hands-on, making every effort to connect as much in person. And so that's something that we really would like to continue, that ability to kind of keep that that bird's eye, that eagle eye on our students, to understand, because it's the pandemic and the traumas and the feelings aren't going to end because the pandemic is over, right? We're still going to deal with the effects of this in a way that we don't even know, because we've never really dealt with this in this way before.
As you all are, there's a debate broken out about sort of learning loss or unfinished learning, and the debate is sort of twofold. First of all, what to call it, and that's sort of turned into just a huge fight about semantics. And then also, hopefully not obscured, more importantly, what to do about it, because a lot of kids have had a really disrupted year over the last 12 months of school. There's obviously some impact from that. Can you talk about, like, what are you doing about that, and how are you thinking about addressing it? And then how are you talking to your teams about it? And are you being particular about saying unfinished learning versus learning loss, or how are you approaching that with your teams?
I think we kind of refer to it more of like learning loss, right? And I don't know if we're at the point yet where we are talking about like how we're going to make those gains next year. To be honest with you, I think a lot of our concern right now is centered around this year, and how are we going to help kids that are not making gains, not making progress in their classes. And we're seeing that through grades. We're seeing that through loss of credit. So there's a lot of movement around, a lot of discussion around how are we helping our students? How are we supporting our students to regain credits? How are we supporting them to make up credit and those kind of things? So there's conversation around that? Yes. I would say so. I think there's a conversation around like summer school. What will summer school look like? Are we going to have our summer school? Are we not going to have our summer school? Will it be in person? Will it not be in person? If I had my choice, I'd rather it be in person. You can tell it. I truly think, I think our kids do better with our teachers. I do. I think if, we will have kids that are going to have major gaps. So if we can get them to come to summer school to start, weeding out some of those gaps, that'd be great. I feel like right now, like I said, I think we are so busy trying to get kids to recover from first semester that either they didn't engage or they didn't pass, that we haven't been focusing quite yet on what will next school year look like. How am I going to compact and get those kids caught up?
And I think we refer to them more as opportunities as opposed to learning a loss, kind of a deficit sort of way of looking at it. But I think definitely to what Carrie was saying is that, we right now we are focusing on our students, trying to get them to graduate, trying to get them to make sure that they, are doing what they need to go on to the next grade and things like that at this point. But our teachers are very diligent in terms of what our students are needing, using our MAP data, which MAP is a program that our district has purchased to kind of assess where our students are. So kind of seeing where are the objectives that our students, what haven't they mastered, and addressing them more in that way as opposed to the learning loss. We start in sixth grade, and so our sixth graders coming in next year haven't tested really since third grade, right? Because they were in fifth grade this year, and when they applied, or when they, all the data, anyway, third grade was the last time that they actually did any kind of real testing, right? And so it's been such a long time that it's not even real time to see exactly where they are. And so because the assessments aren't such, we'll have to wait until STAR to see where our students are and where are those opportunities next year that we're going to have to really fill in from that vein. We are still looking at summer school and what that's going to look like for our students. I think it should not be a compliance thing just because you failed, but actually targeted as much as possible and differentiated for our students in terms of where their loss lies, as opposed to you didn't pass this class, but what exactly is it that you are missing or are needing? I think that we need to continue in that vein for our students for it to really be effective and successful.
Really interesting, because I keep thinking so much about how this is time that's been stolen from kids. Like the kids haven't done anything, right? Like this has been like forced on them and this time is stolen. So it's sort of, how do we as the adults in the system, what's our responsibility to right that, however fumbly, stumbly, awkwardly, right, as we go. So we've talked a lot about what students need, and I'm curious, you both manage a lot of adults on your campus. And you have peers who have been leading on campuses, which can be a lonely, hard task in a normal year. So I'd love to know what do you recommend to those who are making decisions out there in the world? What do teachers need, and what do principals need as we move forward?
Teachers need a clear direction of what type of instruction they're going to be doing, and not a dual instruction kind of a platform or program. I think it is not sustainable to have to keep doing what we're doing this year, where teachers are teaching both the in-person kids and managing the virtual kids. I think, and I know here in Texas, right, TEA has not come out with a announcement yet, or a ruling of, can there be a virtual option for next year? I'm anticipating that's going to probably come. But our teachers, my teachers keep asking all the time, is next year going to be like this year? And I don't have a good answer for them yet. I don't want to lose really good teachers who are exhausted, who are struggling with this kind of dual platform, right, per se, because it is tough. I think teachers need to know that you're going to teach your in-person kids, or if maybe I'm a teacher that I do really well with the online, I am super tech savvy, I can manage this, I'm good at reaching parents, then great, then you can do the online, and we're going to put you here with the online kids that want to do that virtual setting, and separate it from the school, like if that's possible, like if that's going to be allowed or not. Like I said, just doing what we're doing now is not sustainable. Teachers need one set of guidance, like either you're working on this virtual or you're working on your in-person babies, and just kind of have some clear guidance.
And I would just say on the social emotional end of that, what I found is that my teachers need connection, right? So at the very beginning of the year, as a leader, I would try and find ways to appreciate them, free food or whatever it might look like. And usually, food makes everybody happy. Usually, right? But
Time-honored solution, right?
Everything. But what I noticed was that it was not as effective as it had been in the past. But providing opportunities for our teachers to connect on some way was so much more impactful, whether it was a who am I game or things like that. And so I think socially and emotionally, teachers need their needs addressed too, with what they're dealing with in the profession, their efficacy. Are they being effective? Are they wherever they are, but having some training so that they can process in terms of, like, it's not that you're a bad teacher. Maybe the strategies that you previously used don't work in this setting, but what we need to kind of help you to develop new strategies, right? Because teaching is such a personal thing. And so what happens is that now I'm not effective, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad teacher, when in fact it's more about the strategies being used. So helping them to process through what they're going through.
You got all this federal money's coming down. I mean, just stunning sums of money coming down to local school districts. If you ran the zoo, like, what would be your priorities with that money?
For me, when I think about it, we've lost a lot in our district, right? We've lost a lot of students in our enrollment. So our enrollment has gone down. And we all know when enrollment goes down, what that means, right? So we're in the process right now. A lot of schools are looking at surplusing teachers, and we're having to make those decisions of cutting classes, cutting teachers. I think if I had the money, I would fund FTEs, fund teachers on campuses so that the campuses can have smaller class sizes, so that you can regain some of the lost instruction with a smaller class size. It's very, very hard to fill holes and gaps when I'm dealing with classes, a biology class of 30 to 35 kids. If I could fund and give campuses some more teachers, that would be excellent, to be able to lower those class sizes, so that you can, give a little bit more individualized instruction with those kids.
And I would say, in addition to that, probably no shocker, but I think socially and emotionally, I think every campus needs at least one or two interventionists or psychologists, whatever it might look like. But there needs to be greater funding on that social emotional piece, because with the staff that is currently allotted, social emotional has not been as much of a priority as it should. And with everyone coming off of a pandemic, in a post-pandemic world, there is just so much there that really has a potential to result in more school suspensions, more learning loss, more disruptions to the learning environment. And so if we don't address that, and that is not addressed and funded in a way that that can help our students be successful, we're going to see the effects, in a great big way. And that is something that I'm truly scared of, to be very honest, because I see it. I mean, you see the trauma during the pandemic, and you can only imagine what that looks like post-pandemic, because you're not even seeing all the students. You're not seeing those students who are home. And a lot of times we always, not joke, but we say, when students go home over break, when they come back, it's a rough week. It's a rough week when they've been home and they have not been at school. So now they've been home for an entire year. What is that going to look like on our campus? And if we don't have a strategy or or structures in place to meet our students where they are, and help them to learn how to do school again, it's going to be very devastating for education as a whole.
So I just want to hear from both of you, like, and on a positive note, like, I mean, the great thing with education, you get to work with kids. It's exciting. It's always about the future. Like, what are you excited about? What are things coming out of this that you see that are sort of keeping you in a positive frame of mind and moving forward, and things that you think are going to be better as a result?
One of the great things is that in terms of relating to parents and connecting with parents, this has been great, because I do a on Fridays coffee with the principal, and it's virtual, or if they're at night, it's at nighttime, and there's more parental involvement because I can make dinner and still listen to what's going on at school. And so that truly has been a blessing, to learn that technology really is a way to really incorporate more parents into what we're doing, and so that they're more a part of the process. And so that really has been really exciting. So I'm excited to continue that piece and incorporate even more, have more parents be a part of the process going forward. And I miss my kids. I love my sixth graders. They're just amazing. So it'll be great just to see them. That energy, I think, as educators, the thing is that we thrive off of the energy of our students, the energy of learning, the excitement of new things, the excitement of being in school. That helps to energize us as educators. And I think being deprived of that has really been hard on us during this pandemic.
Well, I think I'm in a unique situation that my school has had a complete renovation during this entire pandemic. Like, they have gutted the entire building from the upstairs to the downstairs. Not an inch has been spared. So I think the contractors got lucky right during the shutdown. So that made their work really progress a lot faster. They had access to the building. So I am looking forward to, I keep telling some of my people around me, like, it's going to be like Men in Black, right? When we come back in August, we're going to like wipe this clean from our mind. Like, none of this happened. We're starting fresh in August. We got a brand new building. We're going to do a big open house. Just kind of hanging on to that, like almost that sense of normal, of getting kids, like Tamara said, back in the building, getting school spirit back up, trying to do all the fun things that we've missed on. And, it's like you said, it's fun and exciting right now to see our seniors graduating and, getting to do like the scholarship things. Those are great, but it's hard when you can't really celebrate, academic sweatshirt and you're just passing it up with sweatshirt. In the past, you're doing big pep rallies. Decision days are always big pep rallies. And now it's like very, very low key. So I'm just ready to like do some of the old things we used to do, the traditions, and making it fun.
Well, at the Bush Institute, we've worked with and for on behalf of school principals now for almost a decade, because we just believe so deeply in the outsized role that great principals have for their teachers, and most importantly for their kids. I think Carrie and Tamara are these examples of why we care so much about school principals. So thank you to you both for what you've done this year. I know every year you do so much for your kids, and I know this year I can imagine your campuses are you've really delivered a lot for them. And I hope you get to, at some point, put your feet up and take a nap and take a mini break, but really appreciate all you've done. Andy, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, and we'll be able to talk to you all soon.